I'm so glad you've joined me for this conversation today. It's one of those moments where the news cycle and ancient texts seem to be staring directly at one another, and I wanted to take a quiet moment to look at what's actually happening beneath the surface. Right now, the eyes of the religious world are fixed on a startling public break in the United States. Two of the most influential Catholic cardinals, McElroy and Cupich, have stepped forward to openly challenge the White House and Israel regarding the escalating conflict with Iran, a move that has sent shockwaves through diplomatic and spiritual circles alike. But this isn't just a headline about policy or international relations. It forces us to confront a much deeper, more unsettling question. Why does this specific piece of land, ancient Persia, and the mountains of Israel seem to be the permanent epicenter of a struggle that the Bible suggests will one day involve the entire world? Most people assume this is a modern political mess that started in the 20th century, but the scriptures hint at a signature in this conflict that dates back thousands of years. There is a hidden architectural plan to these events that most observers are missing, and the answer to where this is all heading is far more personal than a map of the Middle East. To understand why two modern cardinals are so deeply unsettled, we have to travel back to the very beginning of the Persian story in the Bible. In the book of Daniel, we find a strange supernatural account of a prince of Persia, not a human king, but a spiritual force that delayed a divine messenger for 21 days. This is our first clue that the Bible views the region of Iran as more than just a territory. It's described as a high-stakes spiritual gateway. Throughout the Old Testament, Persia plays a dual role. It is the nation that liberated the Jews from Babylon under Cyrus the Great, yet it is also the source of the darkest plot to ever face the Hebrew people in the days of Queen Esther. Think about that paradox for a moment. The same ground that birthed a savior for God's people also birthed their potential destroyer. It suggests that this region is a spiritual pressure cooker, a place where the most intense battles between light and shadow are fought long before they ever manifest in our physical world. If this ancient pattern is real, it leads us to an even more provocative thought. If Persia was once the liberator of the faithful, why does the prophetic future, specifically in the visions of Ezekiel, describe a time when this same power leads a massive coalition against the mountains of Israel? What changed in the spiritual DNA of this relationship? This brings us to the present tension involving the Vatican and the White House. When religious leaders like McElroy and Cupich speak out, they aren't just talking about borders, they are expressing a deep-seated anxiety about a tipping point. They see the world moving toward a configuration that feels eerily familiar to those who know the prophetic warnings of a global alignment against the peace of Jerusalem. There is a palpable sense of narrative tension, building in the world today, almost as if the scenery is being shifted backstage for a final act. Each headline about Iran's drones or Israel's defense systems feels like a sentence being written in a book that was finished long ago, and we are simply turning the pages in real time. Some theologians point to the Gog and Magog prophecy, suggesting that the alliances we see forming today, Iran, Russia, and their neighbors, are the exact pieces mentioned by the prophets. While we should be careful not to claim we have the final calendar, it is hard to ignore the fact that the players on the board today are exactly who the ancient text said they would be. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. While the world's superpowers scramble to prevent a conventional war through diplomacy and sanctions, the Bible presents a staggering contrast. While man builds walls and signs treaties, the Creator describes a plan that doesn't depend on the approval of kings or the silence of cardinals. This is the revelation we often miss. The conflict in the Middle East isn't actually about who wins the war of weapons. The Bible suggests that this entire geopolitical struggle is a shaking intended to strip away our trust in human systems. The central question isn't whether Israel or Iran prevails, but whether we recognize that human ambition has reached its limit, making way for a kingdom that isn't built by human hands. When we see these urgent headlines, it's an invitation to stop looking at the news with fear and start looking at our own lives with clarity. If the world is as fragile as the prophets suggested, then the only ground that is actually solid is the one we stand on when we choose faith over the chaos of the day. As you watch the news this week, don't just look at the maps, look at the patterns. Do you feel that the world is moving toward a conclusion, or perhaps a new beginning? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. How do you balance the weight of these global events with your own sense of peace? If you find value in these deeper dives into the intersection of faith and our world, I'd be honored to have you join us here regularly. For now, take a deep breath, stay observant, and remember that even when the world feels like it's shifting, there is a design at work that is far greater than we can imagine. Until next time.